Have you ever faced something so painful, so overwhelming, that you couldn't help but ask, God, why? Why didn't you stop this? If you have, you're not alone. Mary and Martha felt the same way when their brother Lazarus died. And shockingly, it seems like Jesus let it happen, on purpose. But why? And what does it mean for you today? Could your pain and struggles have a greater purpose, even if it feels impossible to see right now? Let's dive into the story and find out. The story of Lazarus begins with a desperate cry for help. Mary and Martha sent a message to Jesus. Lord, the one you love is sick. They were confident he would come right away. After all, he loved Lazarus. He had healed so many others. Why wouldn't he rush to heal his friend? But Jesus didn't rush. In fact, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. Can you imagine the heartbreak? Watching someone you love slip away, wondering why the one person who could save them isn't coming. It almost doesn't make sense, does it? If he loved them, why delay? Why let them suffer? These are the same questions we ask when God doesn't intervene the way we expect him to. But Jesus wasn't ignoring their pain. He was working on something bigger. When his disciples questioned him, he said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." John 11:4. Jesus saw the bigger picture. He knew that Lazarus' death wasn't the end of the story. It was a step in revealing God's glory. And this is a truth we often miss in our own struggles. God can use even our deepest pain for a purpose greater than we can imagine. When Jesus finally arrived in Bethany, Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days. Martha ran to him and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Can you hear the pain in her words? The confusion? The unspoken question, "Why didn't you come?" But even in her grief, Martha held on to a glimmer of faith. She said, "But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask." John 11:22. Jesus responded with one of the most powerful declarations in Scripture. "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die." John 11:25. In that moment, Jesus wasn't just talking about Lazarus. He was revealing a truth that would change everything. Death doesn't have the final word. He does. But what about us? What about the pain we carry today? The loved ones we've lost? The battles we're still fighting? Is there any hope in our struggles? The Apostle Paul gives us insight into this question. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, he writes, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul understood something profound. Our struggles aren't evidence of God's absence. They're opportunities for his strength to shine through. Jesus allowed Lazarus to die to show the world that he has power over death. And just like with Lazarus, God can use our pain to reveal his glory. Romans 8:28 reminds us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him." This doesn't mean our pain isn't real or that our struggles aren't hard, but it does mean they're not without purpose. God is weaving something beautiful, even if we can't see it yet. The story of Lazarus didn't end with death, and neither does yours. Jesus called out, "Lazarus, come out." And Lazarus walked out of the grave, alive. This miracle wasn't just for Lazarus. It was a glimpse of what Jesus would do for all of us through his own death and resurrection. He defeated death so that we could have life, not just here, but for eternity. This is the hope we have in Jesus. No matter how dark our circumstances, the story isn't over. So, why does God allow us to suffer? It's not because he's distant or indifferent. It's because he sees the bigger picture. He knows how to bring life out of loss, strength out of weakness, and glory out of pain. And he's asking you today, just as he asked Martha, do you believe this? John 11:26. You don't have to have all the answers. You just need to take a step of faith, to say, yes, Lord, I believe. If you're in the middle of a storm, remember this. Jesus is with you. He's not just watching from a distance. He's walking with you, weeping with you, and working for your good. Trust Him. Your pain is not the end of the story. It's a chapter in a much bigger book, one where God's love and glory win in the end. If this message spoke to you, share it with someone who needs hope today. And remember, with Jesus, even death doesn't have the final say. He does.